Hi, I'm Tyler, and I'm 22 years old. Having grown up just outside of in Cleveland, Ohio, the local way of life is nothing noteworthy. Just lots of rain and coziness. Infinite green and tiny coffee dots. You can see that I'm in my third year everywhere. Of university pursuing a business degree that I'm not even sure I'm interested in, rent a little apartment with paint chips, along with a roommate who essentially resides at his girlfriend's, indicating that I have the home mostly to myself. To keep the refrigerator and lights running. Every day I bring pizzas to a nearby customer. Joint isn't particularly glamorous, but it pays the expenses, and to be honest, I'm like how easy it is to drive about. Put food down and repeat without any pressure. Mess. Merely the day's routine didn't feel something distinct from the others. I had a complete delivery run and a boring headache. After remaining awake too long to watch some crime documentary series, I reached for my keys. I put on my old sweatshirt and stepped the first time into the typical gloomy drizzle. Typical stops were few and unimportant. There was a loud noise while riding home. Family with 2 teenagers and hyperactive children who hardly said thank you, and a man she gave me an ominously large tip, after which I received my final delivery of move the big pepperoni with the extra cheese. It was in one of those peaceful and affluent areas I was rarely sent. I can still recall thinking, easy finish, appeared before this streamlined a 2-story home with an ideal lawn. The location appeared phony, although it could have been taken directly from a Homes Pages design magazine, and I approached the door, holding the box and double-checking the receipt, knocked on the door, and then opened. And as I stood there frozen, there was a woman who appeared to belong on she may have appeared on a magazine cover. It was challenging for her too. Her crimson hair fell in gentle waves. Beyond her emerald eyes and shoulders, latched upon mine, as if they were aware of it. I didn't realize she was so serene. She had a grace about her that made everything. For a moment, the others around us fade out, wearing dark jeans and a cream sweater. Straightforward and unpretentious. But nevertheless, she gave the impression that elegance had arrived. Naturally, I cleared my throat in front of her. Tripped over the words. Similar to your pizza, she grinned slowly. A self-assured smile that struck me more strongly than I took the box and fingers as I had anticipated. Hardly touched, yet it felt like she jolted, then cocked her head to meet mine. Eyes and spoke in a calm, silky voice. My dear, if you're brave enough, stay. Almost leaped out of my chest, but I was unable to determine whether she was kidding or serious, and I simply stood there, unsure of how to react. A fool seems to be stuck in place. Everything about her shouted authority. She didn't appear anxious or uncertain. As though she was relishing the discomfort, I brought stillness with me, and I had my face on. I let out a terrified cry because I could feel the heat. I stumbled, shook my head, and laughed. Should probably go get more deliveries. She continued to shrug a little. She smiled as if she knew I would mention that suit. Yourself, she uttered in a friendly tone, retreated inside, and the door clicked. I stood there again, closing in behind her, trying to catch my breath for a second. My mind kept repeating, I was brave enough to jog back to my automobile feels foolish because of how ungainly I told myself to ignore what I had done, because it was only a meaningless, strange, sporadic moment for the remainder of my shift. I felt as though I was in a fog whenever I blinked. I remembered the smile on her face. I crashed on that couch later that evening. The couch, but my thoughts, kept coming back to me. About her was foolish. She was merely a client who was an absolute stranger in the past out of my league. Yet I couldn't get it off my mind. The sensation of a memory sticking to you like glue. There was nothing for the next few weeks. It is worth noting only the typical cycle of homework assignments, late-night pizza runs, and classes. And I tried to forget about microwaved dinners. Regarding the peculiar tiny spark from the doorstep. But occasionally I'd zone out and mentally hear her voice if you have the courage to stay, as I often said. For me, it was merely an isolated incident. A lady with a daring sense of humor wasn't significant, and she was older. Clearly out of my league, considerably older, believed that would be the final time I saw her. And then a Saturday arrived. When the sun finally broke in the afternoon through after what seemed like an eternity dreary sky, so I made the decision to decompress. With a stroll at the park close to campus, children were playing, and the air was clear. Couples took their dogs for walks, and the breeze conveyed a faint sound of laughter. Had my earphones in and was looking through playlists when I was forced to pause. I caught sight of her out of the corner of my eye. I didn't realize it was her, but I froze in place. Her name yet. But I was aware of that same profound red hair that shines in the sun. She moved with the same elegance and ease, yet with intention, as if she controlled each step. She put on a basic green outfit. Pants, a tight jacket, and a hanging scarf loose about her neck. I became alarmed. I looked down and feigned to mess away, as if I hadn't just locked my phone. My chest clenched as we looked at each other. Heart rate accelerating. What were the Cleveland may not be small, but it's not significant sprawl, or I told myself to, don't be weird, just keep walking. Move, but I continued to sneak instead. Looks, and she noticed when our gazes locked. And her smile differed from the playful, "This smile comes from the pizza delivery," was kind and truthful, and she began walking my really slow and steady, as if she wasn't in any hurry at all, like if I were about to. I pulled out my earplugs in an attempt to erupt. Difficult to appear at ease. "Hey," she said, as she came to a halt a few feet ahead of me. "You look familiar." I was hardly able to understand, saying, "Well, I believe I delivered a pizza to you a few weeks ago." Her expression glowed when it said, "That's correct. The timid delivery man is you." I wanted to vanish. Yeah, that was me, I realized. Whispered and laughed quietly, not in a cruel manner, but as if she actually discovered it charming. "You didn't stay," I said, shrugging awkwardly. I glanced down the path. "I wasn't sure if you were serious." She spoke clearly and calmly before inquired, tilting her head. "Are you doing anything at the moment?" I blinked and was captivated. Surprised, not really." "Then take a stroll. With me." She informed me without asking, but there was something there that didn't feel pushy. Regarding her soft tone of voice, sure of I couldn't refuse her, so I gave in to stroll next to her as we went down a path with towering pines and vivid. At first, we saw tulips flowering everywhere. Struck up a conversation and inquired about college, my work, and what I intended to do next. It turns out that she was a publishing professional. She had largely relocated to work as a freelance editor. A couple years ago to Cleveland following a divorce, seeking a fresh start. There was something about her that calmed me. I wasn't bothered by the age gap. Was witty, humorous, and possessed this ability for attentively to everything I said mattered. I was laughing before I realized it. She shared more than I had in weeks. Funny tales about terrible papers and writers who believed they were brilliant writers that I informed her about. Food delivery mayhem poured strange customers, incorrect orders, and drinks. It became easier the more we walked. We finally came to a small pond, while ducks idly float in the water. Turning to face me, she tucked a loose hair behind her ear strand. "You're distinct from the majority of men I encounter," she replied thoughtfully, and my cheeks began to flush. She grinned once again and asked, "Is that a good thing?" Delicate, almost aware that it's excellent. I find shy males cute, so I like them. I was shocked because I wasn't used to hearing that. Something like that, especially when it's not from someone. I stood there looking foolish, just like her, then using my toe to nuzzle a rock. Danielle took out her bag and reached inside. Something was scrawled on a tiny notepad, swiftly, and gave me a ripped piece of paper. Had her number, which I don't typically do. She said this, "But I have a feeling I looked down at the worth of you." Paper was in utter shock before I could. She leaned in and even formed a phrase, gave me a gentle peck on the cheek. "And I'll allow you determine what occurs next," she muttered before turning and moving. Removing the same elegant serenity in each step, vanishing along the route between. I spent a lot of time standing among the woods, simply gazing at that piece of paper as if it might disappear. Something I wanted to pursue her, but another area was frozen. After a while, I wandered home. Her number was gripped firmly as she remained dizzy. In my grasp throughout the coming Days that a small sheet of paper rested on my nightstand. Occasionally, I would choose it up, check the number, and then place it. I didn't really know why, so I went back down. I couldn't say that I wasn't her. Fearful that it wasn't precisely what that number represented what it could become. Never experienced anything like a real sure. College flings are a partnership. But Danielle, nothing seemed serious. Danielle got this feeling that was odd. She made me feel confident and composed. I felt as though I wasn't a mere child. After almost a week of acting like a grown-up, I drifted because I couldn't force myself to dial. While working like a ghost and attending school-fatigued mornings from late-night shifts autopilot, yet my mind kept wandering, returning that focused smile to her. She heard my cheek being gently kissed. At last, on a soggy Thursday evening, I took a big breath, reached for my phone, and entered the number that my thumb was hovering over. I waited a whole minute before tapping, "Call it." My heart rang once, then twice. By the third ring of the pounding, I heard her voice after hanging up the phone. "Hi there," I froze for a moment. "Tyler from the park is here. Delivery." A pause occurred, and then I heard that well-known laugh once more, the kind that twisted my stomach as best I could. "I'm beginning to believe you've forgotten my number." I nearly let out a trembling breath. She said, "I'm glad you didn't," and she spoke in a kind, sincere tone. Warmth to it, she inquired, "How about dinner?" "You mean with you?" My throat constricted. "Yes, Tyler is with me," she smiled. I laughed quietly, swearing I don't bite. And suddenly, a portion of the stress relaxed on my shoulders. We selected a tiny downtown Italian restaurant for the next. That night, I hardly slept at all. The mind continued to race through each conceivable scenario of how it might proceed. When Friday finally arrived, I stared at myself for almost an hour in the mirror, attempting to determine what to. I wear everything I possess, no matter how I feel about it. Too informal, or as though I was making too much effort. Ultimately, I put on a pair of dark pants, a shirt with a button-down, and the one I arrived early, and I had a nice jacket, and stood outside the eatery. My phone is fidgeting like it would. The damp pavement helped me relax, glistened in the streetlights at that time. Danielle was in a basic outfit when I saw her. She wore a light beige coat and a black dress. Soft, curls of red hair fall all around. She approached me with her shoulders, the same effortless elegance that made everything else is blurred out while you tidy up. She teased rather well as she approached. I blurted, "You look amazing." Without, "Thank you," she said with a soft grin. "Dinner seemed out of place to you." A movie. The dialogue simply flowed without effort, no pauses, simply honest conversation. We discussed our favorite songs and novels, as well as the films that have endured over time. She described to me the locations her passion for vintage jazz albums drove her to travel, and how her dream was to write a book. One day, I just listened and was captivated. She had lived a lot longer than I had, but she never diminished me in any way, due to the fact that somewhere in the midst of, I acknowledged everything that I was. Sincerely anxious to give you a call, she tilted her head, wondering why I hadn't. In fact, you would want to see me once more. Danielle extended her arm across the table till she put her hand lightly on mine. "Tyler," silently she stated, "I wouldn't have given if I didn't want to see you. You had my number. You again." Her touch made me feel better on the inside. Smiled shyly at her after supper. Chose to take a little stroll through downtown Cleveland. Had a serene enchantment to it at night. Gentle hum of neon traffic signs lovers holding against the drizzle hands. We went by a small bookshop that was in some way still open, so I went inside. Giggling at parts of the strange book time spent with titles piled on the shelves gradually, slid past the streets. Drained away as the night became silent, we saw themselves standing beneath a flickering. The chilly air from the street bulb turned our breath to fog. Danielle gave me a glance. Softer expression than I'd ever seen evening. "I don't want this night to end," she whispered. I swallowed hard. Not knowing what to say, she added, "Return to my house just to chatter, regardless of how we feel." only if you're cozy. I froze once more in the same moment. The tense energy returned I searched for something in her eyes. A flood. For coercion or anticipation. But she smiled and showed patience and kindness. Just barely. If you have the courage to stay. Those are the precise words from that. At night, they slammed into me I murmured softly, "I'll stay." And she put her hand in mine and we strolled. Going into the night together, my heart was thumping, but not out of dread that there was beginning a task that I wasn't quite comprehend yet. But I sensed it constantly. The walk to her place felt nearly identical. We didn't talk much, but everything seemed dreamlike. Wasn't awkward. Rather, it seemed as though this silent understanding between us, we both didn't want to break it. Her fingertips briefly touched mine. Times, after which she softly inserted her hand into mine, like though it had always been there. My chest felt so calm and natural. Was stunned during the whole way to her location. Was only a few blocks away in a nearby ivy crawling in an old brick building up the glowing walls and large windows. From inside, we ascended a narrow third-floor stairway. She clicked gently to unlock the door. She smiled and said, "Come on in." Opening her apartment's interior appeared just as warm as I had expected. Welcoming, softly lighted by lamps, and books that had a subtle vanilla smell were piles on the tables all throughout the place. Even a couple balanced shelves, unsafely perched on window ledges, and there was a tiny record player in the corner. With a wooden vinyl crate next to it, Danielle said, "Make yourself comfortable," murmured, taking her heels off and hanging. She pulled up her coat and vanished into the I stood in the kitchen, not knowing what to do. Briefly before making his way to the I touched the bookshelf and felt the. When she returned, she gave me spines. "A mug of chamomile," she added, smiling. "Helps with anxiety," I grinned shyly. Danielle laughed lightly, as you could see. I've lived long enough to notice it. Sitting side by side on the couch, we drank tea, and having a peaceful conversation shifted from our preferred writers to from awkward childhood recollections to tales we most likely shouldn't have shared, yet nevertheless carried out the warmth of the tea, while the gentle jazz music plays in the backdrop, as well as the golden radiance from the lamps, gave us the impression that we were in a bubble, with just the two of us nestled within from the globe eventually. Our talk began to wane into silence. Danielle put down her cup and reclined against the couch and gave me a look. Truly gave me a long, silent gaze. I could feel her gaze on me for a time, but I didn't want to look away for once. "Do you understand why I requested you to remain there?" she asked softly that night, and I nodded my head. She grinned. Small shake. "No, I still don't." "Somewhat, since you're not the same, you feel genuine," and I was interested in her fingertips. Lightly touched my arm, sending a chill right through me. I was unable to. You can tell if she or I leaned in first, but the distance between us vanished for some reason. Then a gentle, cautious kiss formed between our lips. It developed naturally and wasn't hurried. Organically, slowly, as if we were both fearful of shattering whatever had developed. Everything else vanished between us. Won't go into depth about what occurred next. However, I can confirm that it was, in contrast to anything I've ever experienced previously, it wasn't careless. Was something that went beyond the physical. It felt more intimate, honest, and real. Both of us had stumbled into this situation at just the right moment, as if we'd carried a sense of peaceful nothingness and unexpectedly located the missing component. The outside the city, hours passed in silence, and a light rain pattered across the windows. Laid beside her, leaning my head against her shoulder while listening to the gentle Danielle ran in time with her breath, lazily moving my fingers along my arm. Afterward she muttered, "You gave me something I never imagined." Feeling once more, I turned slightly to look at her, face in the lamp's gentle glow. "What's that?" she asked with a tiny smile. Half-closed eyes. Hope. I had no idea. I just let it soak in. What should I say? Because I secretly shared that sentiment. Eventually, we were drawn under the covers by slumber. We fell asleep in each other's arms. to the rain's sound and the morning's quiet. The sun slowly made its way through the soft light as painted in the room by the curtains. I just lay there after waking up first, admiring the expression on Danielle's face appeared serene, almost angelic, but I didn't want it to relocate, but I was worried that anything could break the enchantment. She finally opened her eyes and stirred, and smiled drowsily at me, saying, Good morning, she said. Good morning, I replied in a whisper. We didn't talk. We just remained there, enmeshed in that ideal neither of us wants the silence to end. Danielle eventually sat up and pulled, I'll make some coffee, she said in her robe. I watched as he went into the kitchen. Her movements as if she had performed 1,000 times more serene, elegant, and peaceful. Something anchoring was present in that. Normally, following the bizarre evening we simply shared, and it felt both delicate and sincere. Similar to something that might disappear if we sat drinking together without being careful. Coffee in silence, hardly uttering a word, just gentle grins, quick looks, and the ease of being close to one another didn't inquire about the status of the situation, or I didn't want to jeopardize the deal because of what it signified. I overanalyzed it this morning, and only wanted to spend as much time as possible in that moment. Would finally allow me to check the moment, and understood I needed to leave. I'm glad, Danielle said, as she led me to the door. You stayed, she remarked in a hushed voice. Nodded, experiencing an unusual pain in my chest. I was unable to truly identify me too. I said that she slowly kissed me while leaning in, and softly lingering for one more second. Her hand remained on my arm longer than necessary as, Call a me, she said as she took a step back. Indeed, I muttered as I went down the steps and onto the peaceful street. I didn't realize I was smiling like a fool. How things appeared in the future. But I felt alive for the first time in a long time. The next days seemed unreal to me. Went through my classes and delivery changes in a sort of fog that floats with whatever it is. This quiet, electric excitement had occurred involving Danielle. It wasn't approximately that evening. It was the relationship, the way she actually perceived me. Comfort I experienced simply by being close to her. Continued to look at my phone in anticipation of seeing her name illuminates the screen throughout the day. I texted her, and she had a great time. Eager to meet you once more. But she refused to reply, telling myself not to overreact. Perhaps she was enmeshed, and perhaps she needs 2 days off from work. Went by, then 4. And after a week, I mailed another message, although this one is more circumspect. Hey, I hope all is well. I was just wondering. I tried calling you, but nothing has come up. It rang till I left a voicemail, but I didn't. Message, I gave another call the following day, and the following day, each time I called, I received the same blank ringtone. Quiet. And every time the pain in my chest became slightly deeper. So I continued to reliving that evening, and the silence morning after repeatedly in my head, looking for any mistakes. However, I was unable to locate one. Everything had seemed to be in order. Natural after hearing it for almost 2 weeks. I couldn't handle not knowing anything. I convinced myself that I no longer had her address. I simply needed some. I wasn't being insane. Sort of resolution, that's all. Cool, overcast afternoon as I headed returning to her building. The same ivy crawled down the same worn brick. The steps gave way beneath my feet as I ascended to her floor, and I stood before for what seemed like an eternity at her door, trying to work up the heart rate nerve when I eventually knocked on nobody's door. I waited and banged again, but it didn't go through. Nothing happened when I put my ear to the door. Was quiet inside, still not. No muted sounds. No footsteps. Desperate and bewildered, I made my way back, down the steps and made his way to the small office near the front door. The building manager was seated there. A middle-aged man behind the desk with... He peered at a clipboard and thick glasses. Can I help you? I asked him as soon as I entered. Inquired, Yeah, I'm trying to find Danielle. I attempted to keep the third-floor corner unit. Despite my steady speech, I could hear with a little shudder, he narrowed his, for a while, clipboard. You mean Miss Nelson? He asked, and I nodded. She had left. My stomach fell. What? When? He said. Turned through a few pages and said, It appears that everything was paid off a week and a half ago. Returned the keys without providing a forwarding address. I was left speechless as I stood there. Are you certain? Even though I already knew, I asked. He responded with a slight shrug of his empathetic sorry kid expression, left in a daze that permeated the streets. In some way, even the sky is colder and emptier, appeared duller, and I ended up standing. Her building is across the street, gazing up through her window, and now that it was deserted, she had simply vanished. No message, no explanation, not even a goodbye. I'll never understand why did she make a mistake out of fear, determined that I was only a passing thrill. I would never be able to get those things. Responses in the days that followed were, I kept looking at my phone like a fool. I walked, knowing it wouldn't help. Once more through that park, the one where we meet in the hopes of seeing her by some. Eventually, I saw the miracle she never exhibited, ceased searching and hoping that I could force I had to confront the reality that Danielle had been only a portion of my narrative. Not the everything was painful in ways I didn't understand how to express myself. But I didn't have any regrets. At all. What we had was definitely not long-lasting. But genuine in the manner that counts, and the Danielle left me with a mark in that manner. More than most others in those few days, she never failed to make me feel seen by showing I learned how to be bold and take risks. She convinced me for the first time that one night I was sufficient for someone. Strolling home in the dim light I sensed a change in the streetlights. I let off and grinned quietly to myself. Soft smile, and perhaps a thought of her. Perhaps. Some folks aren't supposed to stay. They are only there to remind you of what's even the kind of love that is conceivable. Is still worthwhile even if it doesn't last. When I arrived at my flat, I stopped outside. I glanced up at the sky and exhaled and muttered, "Thank you, Danielle." After that, I entered and continued on, aware that I would carry her recollection for the remainder of my existence goodbye.